I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into a wonderful book called Raging Mice by Thomas Lucas. It is a gripping narrative that sheds new light on the Vietnam War's complexities. Through the author's eyes, experience a journey of courage, survival, and the stark realities of war that challenge our perceptions. This is not just another war story, it is a deep exploration of the human spirit. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his important book. The links are below this interview. Tom, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Thank you. You as well, Logan.
This is a great book. It's a great story. It's well written. It's historically accurate. It's a novel, of course. Let's start out with the question a lot of folks at home might have, which is, why is it called Raging Mice?
Well, I wanted to stress, as the novel does, that contradiction between being little and ordinary, common, and what can ironically come out of that, if not explode out of that. Indeed, our existence is like that, isn't it? It's mundane much of the time. We take care of business step by step. But then out of the blue, things happen, sometimes tragically, sometimes wonderfully. But the title is a kind of image of that ordinary enlisted men, or just the little mice who are subject to these vast forces, which they don't know much about, and which, however, control their lives.
Exactly. Like being pawns on a chessboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this is really your story. It's a novel, but it's 1966. You're 18 years old. You're being ripped out of the comfort of your home. You're being sent to a faraway land that you probably had hardly ever even heard of, Vietnam. And tell us the overview of your book, the story.
Oh, you're so right. This was in that, there's been a lot of great books written about Vietnam, but this one focuses on just before the counterculture erupts in the United States and around the world. And the main character, who is much like I was, young, at that time, listeners have to realize that all young men were subject to the draft laws. And so we had to go in the service sooner or later. We could get a deferment, but I thought, why go in the service after college when I'm ready to embark on a career? Why don't I go now? Vietnam was like on page 8, 2 lines at most. It really didn't enter my thinking. So I volunteered for the draft and was sent to Fort Dix and then to Tigerland in Louisiana. And despite entreaties by my commanding officer to go to officer school, or finally he tried to get me to join the Army band, but I stuck to my guns. I just wanted to serve the 2 years. And so I find myself landing in Vietnam. And that's where the book opens. So it's really, reviewers have mentioned a kind of surreal quality, and it is a surreal experience, completely foreign to me. I descend literally through these opaque clouds and land and step off the plane, and boom, this smell hits me. The tropics, I had never imagined. It's a place where there hasn't been a hard frost in 10,000 years, probably. So there's this odor, and then the whole different language, different people, different culture. And so I'm into that, and then I'm whisked away off into the army encampment, and there I'm there 4 days, and I'm reaching for a beer in the beer tent, and there's a flash, and the lights go out, and then there's this huge explosion. The VC had snuck into the largest non-nuclear ammo dump in the world and blown it up. And I was about 1/8 of a mile from it when it blew. So that was really an example for me of what would happen in Vietnam, which was mundane activities day by day, trying to get through, not crashing jungle and fighting these great battles or anything. To the contrary, riding shotgun on a convoy to Saigon, driving the captain's Jeep, which was stolen, by the way, which I was punished for. And I was sent out into the jungle to help clear it finally after a couple of months. And after a couple more months, word got around that I was a writer, that I wanted to be. I had been working on my first novel in my spare moments. And I was asked to become the awards and decorations clerk in headquarters troop. They must have really been hurting for someone to ask me, an 18-year-old kid. But that gave me another new perspective on the war. I would sit at a desk in a tent, and I would be handed pieces of paper with little snippets of information. PFC, Logan Crawford was out on a night patrol and was ambushed, and 3 injured, and he heroically escaped defending his men. I take the snippets of info, and my job is to write it up in a narrative citation form. And that's what I did for month after month. I would write up these citations, proposals for Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal, Bronze Stars, and so forth. So that gave me another view of the war, in addition to my own personal experiences, which largely, in terms of drama, consisted of the out of the blue things that would happen, like that first explosion I told you about when I first got there. But that would happen every once in a while. We would get mortared. We'd have to dive and cram ourselves into the sandbag wall and hide and wait for it to be over. The night landscape is full of tracer rounds, and I always remember this airplane. It would circle around. We called it Puff the Magic Dragon. And it would shoot down these liquid tracer rounds down into the jungle. It was an incredible visual spectacle. So that's hallucinogenic quality out of the mundane. That's what it was like for me and for many of the guys like me.
Tom, were you writing this book pretty much your whole life? Were you when you were there and afterwards? Has this been a work in progress for decades now?
Oh, it's funny. Not funny, strange. I began writing it in the last month I was in Vietnam. I started writing about my experience. Then when I was discharged from the service, I holed up in a little town in the Finger Lakes. And for a little more than a year, I pounded out a 550-page manuscript that was really a kind of day-by-day diary account, really very autobiographical, typical of a young writer. When I finished writing it, my mother had some connections through the university, and I went down to New York. The manuscript was in the hands of a prominent literary agent. I went down to New York to meet with her, and she sat me down and she basically dissected my 550-page autobiography. And you know, I was so crestfallen, but I realized she was right. I hadn't really discovered that fictional truth that is greater than simple autobiography. Mm. So I went back to the Finger Lakes. I started college. I was in college for a year or so, and one evening, it was Christmas Eve, I suddenly got this vision of how a novel could be, inspired from some of the experiences I had. And I jotted it down, I put it on pieces of paper, I pasted it to the wall, and in a few months, Raging Mice was essentially born.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Tom, let me ask you this. Have you envisioned Raging Mice perhaps as a movie or a TV series?
You know, I realized it was very visual and really cinematic. Mm-hmm. It lends itself so easily to a kind of series presentation, which is what the book is like in many ways. It also sets up nicely, just cinematically, as one intense story, because it's a short novel. It's taut, it's intense. It's really focused on the psychological interiority of these ordinary mice soldiers who have no power and are just schlepping around, hoping that they get through. We had no sense of it being good versus evil, communism, democracy. That didn't enter our minds until late in the tour. I began to discover new recruits were bringing these amazing new albums. And I had been a musician. Mm-hmm. And these albums were like Buffalo Springfield, you know, Neil Young is on it. And I'm being introduced to The Doors. Something was happening, and I was eager to get home and find out what it was. Yeah. So the novel is on the cusp of that counterculture upheaval and the whole anti-war movement. It's just before that breaks out. Right. It shows how in ordinary circumstances, ordinary mice like me can get caught up into experiences that we may pay for the rest of our lives.
Or even pay for with your life in some circumstances for 50,000 American young men mostly, right?
Yeah. You know, a fellow right next to my tent, mortar came right through his tent and took him out. Yeah.
Amazing. We have about 1 minute left, Tom. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your writing career. Your parents were both writers, I understand. You're a writer. Where does this novel fall on the spectrum of the books you've written? How many books have you written? Are you working on anything new right now?
Yeah, thanks for asking. This is the first book I'm publishing, but I have a number of works that are finished. And that I'm going to proceed to see that they get out now. The second one's all completely done, American Froth. It's an interesting trip across the country, a kind of vision of America. And I have a large volume of poetry. I went to school for that and studied with great poets. And I have a play that's done. It was actually mounted some years ago for a few days. It's a lot of fun, The Spectral Wedding. Then I have a collection of short stories called Tales of the Finger Lakes. That is, it's my most fun book for me. It incorporates a lot of the stories I heard at my grandfather's knee and my mother's knee. And then I have a large work that I'm working on now as well, a prose work that tries to wrestle with my entire life experience.
Wonderful. We're looking forward to that and all of the books. We're glad you have a treasure trove waiting to come out with the publication of this first novel. It is called Raging Mice. It's written by Thomas Lucas. It is a gripping book that sheds new light on the complexities of Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and it'll take a look at an ordinary man, really not much more than a boy, who is thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Tom, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Logan, it's been a blast. Thank you very much.
I've had a great time as well. Always enjoy talking to you. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.